Good morning. It's great to see everyone here today. We have visitors amongst us, and I'll re-echo the sentiments of Todd. We very much appreciate all of our visitors being with us today. If you've not had an opportunity to get to meet us, so we'd hope you'd stick around just for a minute at the conclusion of our service so we can meet you. Appreciate all of our members being here as well. Charles, my brother and I, we have a first cousin. He's slightly older than we are on the mother's side of the family, but he had a significant problem growing up. You see, one of his goals was to exceed the 5-foot mark, but he was vertically challenged. See, genetics did not work in his favor. And I'm not sure that he ever got over 5 foot tall, even wearing cowboy boots. So much to our concern, when this cousin got up to the age where he was dating real seriously, he got attached to a young lady in Middlesboro, Kentucky. Now, I don't know if you know where Middlesboro is, but it's right on the southeast corner, not too far from Virginia or West Virginia, up there. And those people there are known to be clannish. You know, you've heard of the Hatfields and McCoys. Up in West Virginia, when in Middlesboro, Kentucky, the clan was the Fuson clan, F-U-S-O-N. We tried to advise our cousin that he was getting into something that he didn't need to be very careful of, because he was going to be at a competitive disadvantage, because the Fusons were known to be some pretty rough and ornery folks. Yeah, their names, two of them were Herschel and Clyde. But the locals all knew them for the names that they wore there. One was Ig and the other was Ugg. And you can imagine that stood for ignorant and ugly. Being from Tennessee, Charles and I happen to be pretty loyal Tennessee fans, not as loyal as some. We wish they'd win a few more football games. However, we had one of our cousins, and I'll have to say he was further on down the family tree there. Mother said we had to keep on acknowledging his existence. He wasn't the first cousin, wasn't the second cousin, but he was a cousin nonetheless. He had a problem staying married. True story that on the night of his third wife's, his third wife's wake, she was lying there in the funeral home, he was not to be found. Come to find out, he was at a UT football game in Columbia, South Carolina. But much to his credit, he didn't make it back in time for the funeral. You know, family, each one of us has one. For those that are married, you probably have, relatives there on both sides, some of which we may be proud of and claim, and possibly some that those once-a-year family get-togethers are just a little bit too frequent. As Christians, we're a part of a family, one that in many situations be more important to us than our blood relatives. And as Christians, we share a common heritage and have been purchased by the blood of Christ. This morning I want to talk to you just a few minutes about family. You know, Satan, through COVID-19, has really disrupted, church life. One Sunday, I can remember it vividly here, we were meeting as normal. The next Sunday there, without warning, we found ourselves scrambling to cob together some form of electronic substitute. We tried Facebook for one Sunday, but thanks to our AV team, quickly they were able to put together what I call a skeletal broadcast. And I do mean a skeletal. There were about 5 or 6 of us in here putting together a service that would then be live streamed there. We really didn't know how dangerous COVID-19 was or how to properly protect ourselves. The news media and government officials appropriately came in and gave us a lot of mixed signals. We were encouraged to abandon fellowship that we'd always known, no in-person assemblies, no shared Lord's Supper, no Bible classes, no fellowship events. But gradually, we were able to prepare and present a live stream service, and all this improved, and we learned how to live with COVID-19 while still being bombarded by hosts of misinformation. It seems that our emotions and activities were being governed by the 6 o'clock news. Later, we found that with reasonable, responsible precautions, we could resume in-person worship, realizing that personal health issues would hamper some from participating. Questions. When will we ever restore everybody's confidence in all of the pre-COVID-19 church functions? When will our church family life return to normal? Time will tell, but we got to keep praying. There's two things that we're entirely confident of, however. One, God loves us, and second, Christ died for us. Put a few things in perspective. The early church, first century church, experienced many more challenges than what we will ever experience with regard to what we've seen with COVID-19, but yet they grew and they prospered. And you might say, well, this pandemic thing has thrown us for a loop. Brothers and sisters, this is not the first pandemic that the church has seen. In 1919 there was a pandemic unlike what the world had probably seen prior to that. It was known as the Spanish flu. H1N1 is what the scientists branded that. It's estimated that 500 million people were impacted by the Spanish flu. That was 1/3 of every human being that existed at that point in time. There were 20 to 50 million deaths worldwide. In this country alone, our death was something like 675,000 people. Now, if you give our current population at 334 million, if you put it in today's terms, that would be equivalent of 2.2 million deaths. People wore masks. They closed schools, they closed churches. And to top it off, we're involved with a little thing called World War I. But obviously the church survived. We have to get on with life and continue to love one another as families should and must do. We need to continue to work restoring our church family. For some of us, church involvement is something to be worked on. For some of us, church attendance could be an issue. For some of us, reestablishing and improving relationships could be an issue. However, we must not let COVID-19 keep us from functioning as a church family that we need to be. I'd like to spend a few minutes going over some scriptures that I put together with regard to preparing this lesson. A copy of these have been handed out. Yes, there was a purpose. And I'd like, if you would, to follow along as I read these scriptures. All these passages for the NASB. And the scriptures, they're in the same exact order that you'll find them in the New Testament. And here are some of the things that 7 men that you should be familiar with have to say. 7 men. Christ, Matthew, Luke, Paul, James, Peter, and John. Matthew 16:18. I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. Matthew 18:15. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. Matthew 18:21-22. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. They were continually, Acts 2:42, they were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and prayer. Acts 2:46 and 47. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and the breaking of bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord was adding to the number day by day those who were being saved. Romans 12:10. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor. Galatians 6:10. So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those of the household of faith. Ephesians 5:28. So husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. 1 Thessalonians 4:10-12. But we urge you, brethren, to excel more and to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life and to attend to your own business and to work with your hands, just as we commanded you, so that you will behave properly toward outsiders and not be in any need. 1 Timothy 2, the first 2 verses. First of all, then I urge that entreaties and prayers and petitions and thanksgivings be made to all men, for kings and all who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. Hebrews 3:12-14. Take care, brethren, that there not be in any one of you an evil, unbelieving heart that falls away from the living God, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it's still called a day, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Christ if we hold fast the beginning of our assurance firm until the end. Hebrews 10:23-25. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling as the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day drawing near. Hebrews 13:1. Let love of the brethren continue. James 5:19 through 20. My brethren, if any among you strays from the truth, and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns the sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death, will cover a multitude of sins. 1 Peter 1:22 and 23. Since you have, in obedience to the truth, purified your souls for a sincere love of the brethren, fervently love one another from the heart. For you have been born again, not of seed, which is perishable, but imperishable. That is, through the living and enduring Word of God. 1 Peter 2:17. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. 1 John 4:7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. 1 John 4:11 and 12. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought to love one another. No one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us. And 1 John 4:21. And this commandment we have from Him, that the one who loves God should love his brother also. We thank God in these writers for these words of encouragement. Did you follow along with me what 7 men that we need to be intimately knowledgeable of had to say about love? Now, if one writer says something, it's impressive. When you get 7 people all of the same mind, and these are biblical writers and God's scriptures for us. Obviously, I had a reason for distributing these scriptures. They are the unabridged words of Christ and many of the New Testament writers. I would ask that you take them home and reflect on them. I'd like to share with you now some of my thoughts. You might call them platitudes, and all that I ask is that you give me your attention just for a few minutes longer. Make every day count for the Lord. It's His. We're accountable. As I've aged, one of the things I include in my daily prayers is, Lord, just please open my eyes for what I can do today. Make it a good day. Make it your day. I'm accountable for each and every day, each minute that I have. Read the Bible, pray daily. You say, Mac, I've heard that since I was knee-high. Well, yes, but if you implemented it, I can tell you honestly, if I go a day without reading the Bible and praying multiple times, I feel like my day has not been well worth the time. I think I'd rather go without eating, and I mean that sincerely. Read the Bible every day. Don't know how to say it any plainer than that. It's there in multiple translations, and pray daily. How can you have a relationship with God if you're not praying? Don't give up. Don't give in. Charles and I were fortunate enough growing up to have an example that's unbelievable, and I think back on it. It had to do with a close relative. It was our father's brother, his only living brother. His name was Clarence. His friends knew him as Red. He was in the 101st, the Screaming Eagles, airborne, and they were trucked into Bastogne. On Christmas Eve, 1944, while surrounded by the Nazis, Hitler's army there, he found himself in a foxhole. And sometime during that Christmas Eve, an enemy 88 shell landed in the foxhole. Everyone was killed but Uncle Clarence, and when he looked down, he had no legs below the knees. If it hadn't been so bitterly cold, he would have died. But his buddies rallied around him there, put tourniquets on best they could, and they kept him alive in a barn for 3 days until Patton's army broke through. But that was just the beginning of the ordeal, because once Uncle Clarence was evacuated, he was put on a hospital ship, transported back to the States, and he ended up in a VA hospital in Atlanta. And then for the next year, because they didn't have the medicines we do now, he kept on having successive surgeries, and they kept on taking off parts of both legs. Till he ended up after that year, he only had nubs. Now you'd say, well, man, he's not got much for life. Well, he was discharged, and he went back first, and he had to get his emotions put together in Van Buren County. And then he moved over to Warren County, and he started putting his life, back together. He married the prettiest girl in the county. He came in and developed a business as an accountant. When it came time for someone to coach Little League, there he was. When it came time to repair his roof, he would come in and build a scaffold, and his arms had tremendous strength, and he was up on the scaffold repairing his own roof. When it came time to go to church on Sunday, and I don't know if any of you know about McMinnville, Tennessee, but there's a Central Church of Christ. It's right downtown. It's got about 9 granite steps, and they're not short steps. Uncle Clarence would strap on his legs, use his 2 wooden canes, and unassisted, he would go up the steps. And he would worship, take his place. Don't give up, don't give in. Live an honest, hard-working life. Don't be a busybody. Be careful of what you say about your brother. God is watching and listening. Every time you want to stop and talk about someone else, anyone else, just know that God's recorder is going. And yes, we'll hear about it at some point in time. God is watching, God is listening. Look for opportunities to do good, especially to church members. I think I read a scripture here, we all saw it a minute ago, that's sort of a commandment there, something that we need to be doing. If you don't know your brother and sister, you're not going to know what needs there are. If you have a need, know a need, it's your responsibility to take some action. Don't let the news media control your emotions. Do some independent thinking. Manage your own emotions. You know, Charles and I were privileged. I think I was 6 or 7 when we got our first TV back in 1956. You know, it was black and white, and we did get 3 channels if you had the antenna pointed in the right direction. It didn't take me long to realize, I think by the age of 9 or 10, that what I was seeing on TV was having an impact on my emotions, my thoughts. And that scared me. Somebody else was influencing me at that age. Think of all of the news media and all the information that we get from day to day, and it can't help but come in and have some impact. You got to stop and think and have a few independent thoughts along the way. You know, it's easy to lose contact with others. Make contact with you can. We've got this instant church directory. I carry it around. It's on our cell phones, and we use it. We should use it every day. I use it multiple times a day to come in and make contact. I'll have to confess, I've got, and Charles does too, we were in this together, 5 first cousins on our mother's side. I lost track of them for a number of years. But then I came to my senses. I got information, contacted them, and reestablished communication in not too distant past. It is easy to hole up in our own cave at home and not be able to reach out to others. But brothers and sisters, I'm glad you're here today. I wish we had all of our members here today. Make time to go in and contact your brothers and sisters while you can. Social media is not an acceptable substitute for person-to-person communication. It's a one-way street. Yes, you get a response, but you don't get to see someone smile. You don't get to see their eyes. You don't get to see their facial expression. You know, social media has its place, but not in our communication. Both intended righteousness and lack of respect are harmful. Enough said. Don't pass up an opportunity to encourage someone, especially your fellow church members. You know the passage I had up here on the screen here a little while ago from Hebrews, the 3rd chapter? Well, if you're following along, we've now gone through that about 3 times. Hint, we're going to hit it again, you know, on that. Don't mess up an opportunity, lose an opportunity of encouraging someone. Maybe it's just a phone call. Maybe it's a text. Maybe it's an email. Do something to let people know that you really care about them. If you don't communicate it, how's it going to happen? Encourage. Brothers and sisters, we need a lot of encouragement in this day and time. You look at the world news and it's easy to come in and get frustrated. You know, where are we going? What's going to happen? The economy or whatever. Encourage one another. It's our responsibility. Tell your physical and church family that you love them. Guys, you need to hug your wives. Ladies, if you want to scare your husband, give him a hug too. You know, there's no reason why you can't come in and show affection. we're known as a fairly affectionate congregation. I'll tell you, for me, I've never been known as a teddy bear. So I have to work on that a little bit. It comes in. We've got to show affection. If you want to have a happy home, come in and hug your wife. Hold her hand every now and then. She may be a little bit suspicious, but maybe she'll get over it. It won't hurt any of us, Meet and communicate with your Christian brothers and sisters as often as possible. How are you going to get to know them if you don't, communicate, with them? Once a time before COVID, we were able to come in and we had, fellowship events. I think we had 8 different groups there, 1 through 4 and A and B and whatever, and we're meeting almost every Sunday. You've heard, today mentioned the CIA is getting together. Other people are getting in. New things are happening. But we've got to have an opportunity to come in and communicate just as we want to in our own families, our own physical families. We've got to restore that within our church families. You can control your habits. Break bad habits, start good habits. How much time do we waste by coming in just on bad habits? There's a little word that I happened to learn, in the military, you can survive. It's called discipline. Of coming in, making a self-evaluation, coming in, break that bad habit. If you're not praying or reading the Bible every day, start a habit. It takes about 15, 16 times, to go ahead and get a habit started. But once you get that habit started, it's a good thing. It'll go with you the rest of your life. Oh, well. You are responsible for your brothers and sisters. Sincerity counts. You're responsible. I don't know how any other way of coming in with the word responsible. It's just responsible. You've got to come in and appreciate that, yes, we are accountable for each and every one of us. Forgive one another, move on. Enough said. Get involved in church work. Commitment and involvement will lead to growth. Contribute more than your money. JFK had a saying. I'm going to translate that in Safely English there, because I think it comes in and it's important for our own church life. Ask not, what can the church do for me? Rather ask, what can I do for the church? If it's all about me, you're not going to go very far. If you open your eyes, your interest, whatever, and say, well, I'm going to give more than my money, just as we've already talked about today, and appreciate Glenn's comments there. It's a commitment. Like he said in Romans, they first gave themselves. Be careful when judging another's heart. That's actually scriptural, because it comes in and says, we don't know the thoughts of another man. So if you want to spend time judging, that's sort of a wasted effort. Recognition, comfort, encouragement, they're all appropriate. Spending undue amount of time in judging doesn't get you anywhere. And finally, the Lord has blessed this congregation many times over. We've been a congregation for almost 22 years now. Things are looking promising. We've got a lot of dedicated members. We have a great minister, and I think we've got a great youth minister coming. Well, we've got to give Charlie a chance. We've got to come in and everyone support him. Parents have got to support him. Youth's got to support him. Every one of us has got to support him. And you'll see what I've underlined at the very bottom, because this is, if you want a takeaway, this is a takeaway. Our future depends on how we function as a family. Like I say, I'm hoping our best days are in front of us. We've got to pull together. We've got to love one another. We've got to work together. All of these things are extremely important. 2 last scriptures, and then the lesson will be yours. Paul, he was near his time to go to heaven. He was in a jail in Rome. But he thought of that congregation. It had started way up there in Macedonia, in Philippi, back on his second missionary journey. And he had some words that he wanted them to appreciate. Finally, brethren, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. The things that you've learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. And then not to disappoint. Read Hebrews 3:13. Read it. Read it often. But encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called a day, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Responsibility, encouragement. These are things that I would ask us to think on. You know, this lesson is for me as well. It's hopefully you'll be able to take something away from it as well. Christ died for us. He died for this family. This morning, if you've not put on Christ in baptism, you can't receive all of the benefits that you can from being a part of this family. Now's a good time to respond. So if you have a prayer request, if you're ready to accept the gospel invitation, we'd ask you, please come while we stand and sing.